I was born in 1941 in Prague, in the moment when we were occupied by Germany. It was not Czechoslovakia at the time, but Protectorate Böhmen and Mähren, Czechia and Moravia. So that's my beginning. I spent the first year of communism, I would say the worst years as regards the degree of repression and the trials and people being killed and so on. I spent as a 6, 7, 8 years old boy. My parents lived in the moment of the Nazi occupation in Czechoslovakia, and they felt being liberated by the Red Army in Prague in May 1945. So they belong to the generation which did not aggressively oppose the first year. That's my feeling. I discovered names like Mises and Hayek and Milton Friedman and all of them. So that was for us the 1960s, and especially the second part of the 1960s was the moment of our learning many things, including learning the alternatives to the communist regime, and that was my really important education. The communism is trivialized, it's easy to entirely oppose communism, stop. And it's not necessary to say anything else. Nevertheless, communism had its different dimensions. Communism had, of course, its different degrees of oppressiveness. When the communists again somehow restored their original power, which was dramatically weakened in the second half of the 1960s, the people like me were fired from institutions like academies and universities. So I was stopped from being able to teach students, to publish anything, and it came relatively too early for me. I was 27. It was just at the beginning of my life, of my career. Nevertheless, already at that time, our views, the views of people like me, were absolute. So communism, no, and what we want is really capitalism and free markets and parliamentary democracy and so on. So that was for us. Then we spent another 20 years in a very unpleasant regime, but unpleasant in another respect. You were not allowed to work in the in the occupations. You were able to work. You were not allowed to travel to the West. You were not allowed to write. You were not allowed, in my case, to teach students. Nevertheless, you were not imprisoned. You could sort of normally live. I'm absolutely sure that I would not have been able to do what I did since the moment of the fall of communism without being part of the country, part of the story, without living there, because all those who left the country, spent 20, 30 years abroad, usually were missing the elementary understanding of the country, of the historical processes, and that was wrong. I remember that one professor from Cornell came, whom I met when I was there in 1968, visited Prague, and he asked me, do the people really believe in communism and Marxism? I say 1980, not 1989, or let's say 10 years before the end of communism. And I remember my answer at that time already was, I don't think that many people in this country believe in communism. or in Marxism, and my point was there are more true believers in Marxism at the University of California in Berkeley than in the whole communist Czechoslovakia. And I am absolutely sure this is true. When I want to show the relative softness and weakness of communism, we recently in my institute in Prague, 3 months ago, we organized a seminar debate, being absolutely frustrated with the indoctrination of our children now, with the nonsenses and ideologies of environmentalism, of global warming doctrine, of Europeanism, and so on, political correctness, multiculturalism, transnationalism, genderism, and feminism, and so on. The dangerous indoctrination of the children now is worse than in the last days of already more and more weakened communism. In the past, in the communist past, the families were the crucial mechanism for defending children against the official indoctrination. Whereas now, the families cease to play such a role. You know, I don't think that the parents fight with the children in California about the nonsenses of global warming. You know, so I am afraid that or at least that was we were not voting at that discussion, but the majority feeling was that we lost the defense originally coming from the parents, from the families. That's one of the protecting belts, to put it that way, more or less disappeared or has been weakened day by day with the genderism and the political correctness and all of them. So on the one hand, I spent most of my life in communism, and definitely my life could have been much better incomparably better without that. Nevertheless, I belong to those people who say we should never forget communism. We should never marginalize its deeds and all the tragedies. But don't forget that there are new isms, that communism is now hidden in the different clothes. He is in disguise. Communism lives now in new reincarnations, where the title communism is not the label communism is not used, and I'm afraid we are not attentive enough to those new dangers, and that's our task for the future.